these models, they are not free of limitations and drawbacks, right? They have a number of limitations and drawbacks. I mean, I touched in a couple of them. For example, they can still lead to extreme and unreliable allocations. They try to improve that. I mean, the train of blackness is clear. It's clear that you end up in extreme allocations because of the alphas, right? It's extremely sensitive to the alphas, and that those influence a lot. The black Litterman less, but still, it's still can still achieve that extreme allocations. The views, they can be biased, right? I talked about the last lecture, that the views can be biased and led by emotions, right? So here you're assuming a rational investor, but to make these views here, you're assuming rationality, but that might not be necessarily the case. Okay. Views as well as uncertainty about the views, they are subjective. For example, the method of estimating the variance of the likelihood, that's extremely subjective. The papers, they propose different methods and so on, but all of them are subjective. And the views as well, right? I mean, you have to necessarily, I mean, that's, I mean, the investor, he's gonna put, what is that? Okay, it's like 3%. You have to use something, right? That has to come from somewhere. How how it's a guess. It's a complete guess. And according to the model, right? Think about only the model itself. It's a guess. I don't know. It has to come from somewhere. That's what I'm saying. It's either you're gonna do an analysis before that, or you're gonna understand the economy in some way, right? You're gonna do some analysis. The model itself, you know, the views are very subjective. It doesn't tell anything about it. The model doesn't say anything about how to get those views. So it's outside the model. It's exogenous to the model, right? So that's a critique. In particular, when the omega is also subjective, the estimation method of the omega is subjective. If the estimation method of the omega is subjective, it basically means that the whole component of fields in the model is extremely subjective, right? And if you end up estimating the omega like close to 0, that means that the likelihood is going to be very tight. It's going to influence a lot the posterior, like here. I mean, that mean there is going to influence the weights. So the weights become subjective. You require something else outside the model to some other technique or something, some strategy to put together with the model, right? So so the more like the more in that case is like the more certain the the more skilled the investor is, the least important actually the model is at the end. The model becomes not important, but then it's like, okay, so I have the model then, right? So that's and it's outside the model, right? Complete outside the model. It's something that the model you just put that information in it in a sort of a subjective way, right? Um, the model also assumes normality of returns, right? That's an issue as well. The returns are not normal, right? Black Litterman tends to generate allocations still can be very similar to Markowitz. That can still happen. But it was very I mean, it was invented and it was very tested and so on. It was very used and but there are issues. I mean, no model is at the end is free of problems. I mean, all models have problems, and they are used as tools, right? As tools to guide the investor. You know, you find some sort of market inefficiency, something in the data. That's the idea of the model. You find something in the data that you're able to exploit, right? And that will generate extra returns. I like it a lot. This idea. I mean, one of the issues here is, of course, the bias, the emotions, right? I mean, when, investing with emotions is extremely dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. So one advantage, of course, of models. I mean, here, this model is highly dependent on investors' views, and it's a assumption of it is that the investor is rational. But this is tricky. One source of irrationality is emotions, right? And this is very dangerous, right? Whereas if you use 100% model, but a good model, eliminate the emotion. So it depends. I mean, it depends always on the strategy. And one important aspect of the models is that they tend to, as they are more and more used, they tend to lose the importance. As they are more and more used, they tend to lose the importance. Because they become, I mean, what is a model is created to exploit some kind of market inefficiency, right? That's the idea of a model in active management, is to exploit some market inefficient. But if the model becomes widely known, then you approach the efficient market hypothesis. And the ability of the model to exploit the market inefficiency disappears. And that's why in that kind of framework here, then the views of the guy becomes important, right? The views of the guy becomes important, but that can be very dangerous as well. So understand. So there's these different aspects. Models, they lose their importance with time as well, because more people start using it and so on and so forth. But I mean, so I mean, these models, I mean, they introduce some interesting characteristics, I think. They introduce some interesting insights, and they are good foundation, I think.